Initially, I was a bit mixed on Triangle Strategy, unsure if I was going to pick up the game for myself. I thought it was just going to be a Final Fantasy Tactics clone, which made me way less interested. I'm going to be honest, I don't like Final Fantasy Tactics. But the demos for the game convinced me there was more here to look into. While not a truly remarkable game, fans of SRPGs will find something to enjoy in this modern title, as opposed from many of the genre's best, to create something good. We follow the exploits of the newly appointed Lord of House Wolfort, a young man by the name of Serenoa. Very quickly, people start making political moves, and I'm gonna be honest, I really don't care. Political drama is at the heart of all strategy RPG stories, and what I like about Triangle Strategy is you get plenty of scenes that are completely optional, but show the opinions and rationale between all of the key figures, be they ally or foe. Although the story is pretty hard to follow at first, one has to sit through between 30 to 40 minutes of dialogue in the first few chapters just getting everyone caught up on the state of the world. This is a problem slightly enhanced by the fact that dialogue boxes don't show character portraits of the person currently talking. That sounds like a non-issue, but its absence hurts more than one might realize. When I can see a picture of the character talking, it is a great help in identifying who is speaking. After all, it's been a staple of the genre since Fire Emblem 1. So the fact that this current release doesn't follow suit is very strange. Maybe this wouldn't be as much of a hindrance with some better voice acting because, at least with the English dub, nearly every single performance is so dry. It felt like the director just gave vague instructions to sound theatrical and the actors tried way too hard to figure out what that meant. Honestly, if I wasn't seriously evaluating the game, I would have been more tempted to skip the story. Although, even if I could, there would still be an argument that I shouldn't. Triangle Strategy offers up actual decision-making and honest role-playing that drives the narrative forward. At certain points in the story, your army is tasked with making a choice that they diplomatically vote on. Everyone has their own opinion swaying in one direction or another. If you want to, you can actually try to convince them to change their minds by engaging in debate. I praise this system. It makes you feel like your comrades' opinions on the conflict are just as important as your own, and fleshes them out greatly. Although from a mechanical standpoint, this concept is pretty flawed. When beginning a voting segment, there's always an even split and one undecided person. All you need to do is convince that one undecided party the side you want to go with, and that's all you need. And if you want to be absolutely sure, you can always talk to the other opposed party members to try and sway them to your side. Since you lose nothing by failing a negotiation, there's no reason not to try changing minds. The junction to choose between 3 different options didn't even come into play until nearly 3/4 into the game. It was during the try voting I found myself the most undecided on which path was truly for the best. They should have come into play much sooner. Although my criticisms are minor because the positives are too good to ignore. Convincing your team is not meaningless fluff, as the different decisions can result in playing entirely alternative chapters, and recruiting different characters. More than that, there are entirely different story branches. This game offers the chance for players to feel like they didn't have the exact same story as someone else, and gives great replayability options for those who may want to revisit the game. I even found myself in a premature bad ending at one point, which I always love when games implement. This is a branching story where your choices matter in a way that I love. Fire Emblem better be taking notes from this game. And the core gameplay picks up a lot of the slack as well. I was a bit worried it would just copy Final Fantasy Tactics in every way and just put a new coat of paint on it, but I'm pleased to say the developers of this game took a lot of inspiration elsewhere. Now, yes, Triangle Strategy is perhaps most prominently inspired by FF Tactics, but there are also shades of Fire Emblem, and even Shining Force present as well. Because it's not trying to capture the feel of one specific game series, it creates something that feels more distinct. For example, you don't have to commit to every action until you're ready to make your move, just like in Fire Emblem. It affords you the opportunity to check the various actions you have against the enemies, and see what the best possible move is. And similar to Shining Force, there is actually no permanent death in this game. In fact, there's no penalty for characters dying at all, aside from the opportunity cost of not gaining experience for the rest of the battle, that is. In fact, if a particular fight isn't going your way, you can even retreat, which allows you to retain the experience and currency you obtained. This makes it possible to grind even within a certain chapter battle if you so choose. And characters who are behind the level curve gain more experience, so it's not difficult to catch up. That isn't the only opportunity to grind afforded to you. Players can even participate in optional battles through their encampment, as an opportunity to earn even further rewards. And one thing that I really appreciate is they change up the enemy layouts and objectives to make them more difficult. If this still isn't enough, you can even change the game's difficulty at any time, raising or lowering it as you please. I will admit that I started this game on hard because I assumed I would be able to handle it. As I soon learned, I couldn't. In fact, even on this game's normal difficulty, Triangle Strategy is an extremely challenging SRPG. So while the game lacking a tangible punishment for death was initially strange, the overall difficulty of the game and incredibly unique talents of every soldier made it an understandable omission. In fact, I actually ended up bumping the difficulty down to easy at the halfway mark. Although Triangle Strategy seriously made me consider if I'm actually dumb, because even easy isn't a pushover difficulty. If that sounds like even more of a deal breaker, there is also a very easy mode as well. But don't ever feel ashamed for playing on the lowest difficulty. This game just got hands, and you're not any lesser for it. But battles are not the only form of interaction you'll partake in. You may sometimes get the opportunity to explore a small town. Here's where you can explore and find hidden items across the environment, or even talk to NPCs and gather information on the world. This information can also serve as evidence to help convince your party members to make a certain decision during the voting phase of the game. I will say these exploration segments felt a little too frequent. A big reason I felt this way is because you return to the same areas to explore pretty often. I wouldn't mind this as much if there was town exploration every other chapter, then it would feel more exciting to return to old areas. But if you want, you could totally skip these segments as well. Now, despite my strong praise, there are a few decisions I'm not nearly as fond of. I just like the fact there isn't a distinct player and enemy phase. Actions are decided by a turn order that will allow characters to act more frequently if they have a higher speed stat. I think this method of selection severely punishes characters with a lower speed stat, making them more perpetually difficult to use. However, I will say I'm grateful the turn order is always presented at the bottom of the screen, so I'm never surprised by some nonsense I forgot to check. I also don't like the dual strike system either. When two units are on opposite sides of an enemy unit, they'll both make an attack at the same time. I think this makes the battles a bit difficult to keep track of. Maybe this is just me, but it seems like enemies are in way more advantageous positions in both placement and turn order to use this. So it's something that only adds to this game's steep difficulty. But that's just my take. Most of my other issues with Triangle Strategy can be reduced down to these minor annoyances. Well, except for one. And this is something where I feel like I'm the only person in the world who feels this way, which I think makes it all the more important I vocalize my thoughts. I hate HD 2D. Between the over-intensive lighting, the blur imposed on everything, and the overall drab color palette, this is a game I honestly can't play for long sessions because I find it an incredibly straining art style to look at. Now, I'm not against the spirit of HD 2D. It's Square Enix's specific brand of the style I find so obnoxious. Because the entire mantra of the company is to push graphical fidelity however it can, we get this absolute mess of an art style, where everything shimmers like a diamond and particle effects are just shoved in without any thought as to why they are there, creating unneeded visual noise. It almost feels like they're too afraid of just doing something simple, when something simple is so much better than this alternative. Pixel art is just one of those things that has a timeless quality, at least to me. I like to appreciate it, and consider how every dot is placed with intentionality and care. And all of these post-processing effects take away from the pixel art's beauty. I can barely even tell what I'm looking at, and it's impossible to notice all the details that are there. It's too busy, too ugly, and I just can't get behind it. But I'm happy to say that Triangle Strategy has left me incredibly pleased. I'm hopeful that perhaps Triangle Strategy will embolden other developers to try and be ambitious with their own projects, and give the Fire Emblem series some much needed competition. There's plenty of options to help you enjoy the game no matter your skill level, and even incentivized to replay the game if you're already done with the ultimate challenges. If you're still unsure, give the demo a fair and honest chance. I understand the initial chapters are actually a little rough to adapt to, and the story is far too dense in the beginning. But once you're finished, you can even carry your progress into the full game if you enjoyed what you played. Triangle Strategy is not an absolutely noteworthy game in the genre, and playing it isn't going to blow your pants off. It is simply just a really good SRPG. But in a way, that itself is the game's best selling point. There's at least an argument to be made that this is the best game to come out of the genre in a long time. I personally wouldn't go that far, however I did like what I played, and I would say that this game does come with recommendation.